Hi friends, my name is Jackie and welcome to my garden. Today I'm going to give you 10 ideas on cheap containers you can use to grow food. If that's something that you would find helpful, then stick around. Containers can be a great option in a couple of situations. So firstly, if you live in a rental property as I do, the garden beds that are here may not be very well positioned as far as they're under the shade of a tree, or they're under the shade of the tree next door, or they don't drain very well, or they've got really poor soil. That's all examples of things that I have going on in this rental property. But with a rental property you can't do much about that. So instead you can use containers. Secondly, it gives you a lot more flexibility if you're still learning um, how the conditions change over your growing season. So for myself, I live in a subtropical climate. Growing in containers has been invaluable over winter because I've been experimenting as to what I can grow. So being able to move the containers, chase the sun, or take them out of the wind and that type of thing has been really handy. The third reason that pots are a really great option is that it does help as far as the furry pests go. So I've got a couple of dogs that like digging up the odd garden bed, and also we have had a few mice this year, which we haven't ever had before, getting into my garden bed. So whereas the pots really haven't had any issues with that type of thing. As I said, because I live in a rental property, I've found that pots have given me a lot more flexibility, and although it started as me just wanting to find more space, I've just found that in my current situation pots are a really good fit for me. However, that being said, there are some limitations to growing food in pots. So the first thing is that the soil and inputs that you put into that pot is all that that plant is going to have access to in its growing season. So you're going to have to think about what that plant is going to need, and you're probably going to have to use more inputs over the growing season in order to keep giving that plant what it needs. The second point follows on from that, in that you are going to have to spend money on potting mix. Even if you make your own potting mix, you're still going to have to buy the inputs to make sure that there's enough nutrients for your plants during their growing season. So there is an increased cost as far as soil goes. And thirdly, particularly if you're in a hot climate during the summer, you are going to have to water a lot, as in every day, sometimes twice a day depending on the plant. I'm a busy mum, I have a toddler, I work, but I have to get up early in the morning to make sure that my plants are watered. I don't know how many hydrophobic pots I've ended up with that I have to soak in a bucket with some water and some seaweed concentrate, just because I haven't kept the water up to those pots. So the time needed in order to ensure that your garden is watered appropriately is something to consider as well. However, all of that being said, it's still really important to me to continue to grow some of my own food, so I make it work, and I believe it can work for others as well who want the same thing. So back when I first started looking around for options as far as containers went, there were three things that I kept in mind. So I wanted something cheap because I was still learning and I didn't want to spend a lot of money on something that I might decide further down the track wasn't working for me. The second thing was I wanted them to be, as much as possible, I wanted it to be recycled. I wanted to be using things that had already been used in some way. And thirdly, I wanted them to be not quite so big that I could still move them when we do move out of this property. So with all of that in mind, here are my 10 ideas for cheap garden containers. My first idea for cheap garden containers you can grow food in are recycled formula tins. So I just experimented with these. I put the bottoms of some spring onions that we got from the supermarket into them, and we've just been snipping off the greens. They've done really well. They're probably on their way out. So these would be suitable for other small herbs. The two things I would say is that because they're quite a small pot, you do have to watch how hot the soil gets, and you have to keep the water up to them. And also they do rust terribly, so you're probably only going to get 1 to 2 seasons out of them. But as far as an item that when you have a small child, you have a lot of them laying around, they're actually a really good option. So here's my third option for cheap containers that you can grow food in. Go to your local takeaway and ask if they have any old containers. I went to our local Indian takeaway and just asked, and they gave me this for free. So I've made this into a wicking pot. This time has done really well. It'd be a great option for leafy things, radishes, anything like that. Okay, on to number 3. So the third option for cheap containers that you can grow food in are these picnic cups. So these were about 13 cents each. I was watching another YouTube channel and they suggested red solo cups, which I used for a while, and then we bought these because they were cheaper. I actually prefer these because you can see if it's got enough water, if it's starting to dry out, and you know how the water's moving through it and that type of thing. So I actually quite like these. So I actually grow most of my plants from seed. So I use these to sow in. I'll put 10 into these and then separate them later on. This is actually a cutting from a cherry tomato. No, it's not. This is actually a seedling that I grew, but then something nibbled it off at the soil level, and so I trimmed it up a little bit to see whether it would take in, and it has. So that's a good news story. So there's those, and then number 4, seedling pots that I've bought plants in previously. So when you're growing most things from seed, you're going to have to, at some point, you're going to have to move up before you go into a larger pot. It's not good to go too big too soon because, of course, you'll be leaching the nutrients out of that soil before the plant actually gets big enough to use all of them. So I keep every pot that I've ever bought a plant in, and I've asked friends for theirs and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, just to keep all your pots that you ever buy a plant in so that you can step the plants up over time. Let's go to the next one. My 5th idea for cheap containers that you can grow food in are recycle buckets from your local dump shop. So I got these for $1. I got quite a few of them actually. Again, this is something that you need to watch what's been in them before. So I got another one of these that's obviously had some sort of water-soluble paint in it. And so I have to go through quite a process to clean that one up so that I can use it. This has obviously got a cherry tomato in it. I've grown a lot of tomatoes in this type of container, but I also grow galangal, okra, eggplants. You can grow a lot of things in these buckets, and they're cheap, so a really good option. Next one. So my 6th idea for cheap containers you can grow food in are these flat boxes. So I got these for $1, again from my local dump shop. I've grown quite a lot of food in these: beetroot, carrots, lots of lettuce, radishes, all sorts of things. The one thing I would say is that these are really, really brittle because they've been in the sun, and just the kind of plastic they're made out of, they're not really made for outdoor use. So you're probably not going to get a long time out of them. I've gotten a growing season of succession planting out of these, so although they've grown a lot of food, they're not going to last you longer than probably a 12-month period of continued use. But as far as growing a lot of food, they've done really well. Next one. My 7th idea for cheap garden containers that you can grow food in are these ordinary plastic pots. But the interesting thing about these is that I got them on Facebook Marketplace from a landscaper who'd obviously finished a job with them and was just trying to unload them. So I got 25 for $40, so $1.60 each, and they're 30 centimetre pots. I've grown all sorts of stuff in them: tomatoes, these are gooseberries, herbs, lots of things. So they're a really good option. On to number 8. So my 8th idea for cheap containers that you can grow food in is this old steel toolbox. So I got this from a dump shop for $10. And yeah, I mainly use it just to grow flowers in to attract pollinators to the garden. But you could put all sorts of things in here, whether it's beetroot or lettuce or anything that doesn't need a whole lot of room as far as root space. The one thing I would say is just be careful on stuff like this, what's been kept in it previously. I didn't think about it before I bought it, but I probably should have think about what might have been stored in this previously. So yes, as a recycled item, I think it's a great option. It's made out of quite a heavy steel and it's going to last for quite a long time. So for $10, I thought I'd done pretty well. So here is my 9th idea of cheap garden containers that you can grow food in. These are obviously handy pails that I bought from a big chain hardware store for $11, but I know that you can buy these on Facebook Marketplace, particularly if you buy a number of them for cheaper. They grow all the same things that a lot of the other pots that I've got. Herbs, this has got an eggplant in it, tomatoes, all of that kind of thing. Okay, on to the last one. So my 10th and final option for cheap containers you can grow food in is this 65 litre bucket. I obviously bought this from a big chain hardware store for $14. I made it into a wicking pot myself, and I've grown all sorts of things in these, capsicums, herbs, lots of tomatoes, beans, all sorts of things. So another really great option. So there you have it. There are my 10 ideas on cheap garden containers that you can grow food in. If you guys have any ideas as to anything out of the box that people can use, or places to source things that they can grow food in, please comment below. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you in my next video.